not to get too Buddhist about it, but we know where we want to go. And maybe this particular route will get us there. But if not, we have another one. So I'm building up that feeling that maybe this will work, maybe it won't. And talking like that seems to be unusual outside of the film industry. I found it very shocking.
Hi, and welcome to the Creative Solutions Podcast. I'm your host, Isolde Trachtenberg. On the show, you'll hear interviews with innovative creative artists, entrepreneurs, business executives, and thought leaders. You'll have a front row seat as they explore their internal motivations that inspire them to grow, achieve, and innovate. Get their insights and realizations as I tease out answers to questions they've never even pondered before. And now, let's get on with the show. Hey there, and welcome to the Creative Solutions Podcast. I'm your host, Isolde Trachtenberg. Thank you for taking the time to listen. You are going to love this week's guest. Let me tell you about Liz Scully. Liz spent 20 years working on big Hollywood films. You know that's catnip to me. She's won an Emmy, and her work is multi-Oscar nominated. Now, she's taken all that really cool experience and become a business strategist and a mastermind coach, and knows business can be ridiculously fun as well as highly effective. She's Irish, nomadic, and as confused as everyone else why she has an English accent. Liz, thank you so much for being here. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I am thrilled. I'm thrilled. We could spend the entire hour talking about Hollywood. I'm a huge cinephile, so that would be really cool. But actually, I'm the big thing I'm curious about is you went from working on big Hollywood movies and in TV and went, you know what, I'm going to take that experience and I am going to help entrepreneurs and business leaders make something amazing. I would love it if we could go from how did you go from Hollywood to how did your experiences in the film industry shape your approach to business and coaching and masterminds?
Well, I guess I realize that on the surface, it sounds like there isn't a link, but there so is. Because as you know yourself, working in film, there is so much that goes wrong all the time, continually. And there is so much managing of data and client expectations and the fact that things have gone horribly wrong, plus you're managing a team and you're fitting it all together. And all of that is really what any entrepreneur goes through on a daily process. And managing a film director who are the most demanding, difficult, overworked humans on the planet. And it's so similar to working with entrepreneurs. And anyone who's worked in the film industry knows how to run a business, is used to doing networking, is used to doing outreach. And it is so similar. It doesn't seem like it. And I know that when I left the film industry, one of the things that confused me most about the business owners I was surrounded by was they didn't seem to expect things to go wrong at all. I know, because in film, things go horribly, horribly wrong all the time.
Sure.
And what we're looking for is how to make that better. We're not judged on the fact there's been a mistake. We're judged on how we deal with it.
Sure, absolutely. And I'm going to tell you this now because I tell everybody I talk to on this podcast, I have embraced the pause. You will find sometimes you'll be like, is she still there? I am. I want to synthesize what you've said and be able to speak intelligently on it. So it's so interesting to me because this notion of don't ever make mistakes feels counterintuitive to something that's very close to my heart, which is innovation. You cannot innovate. You cannot be cutting edge without spilling the soup sometimes. So when you're working in Hollywood, when you're taking that and translating that entire skill set to working with businesses, how do you change business leaders' mindsets? And maybe you don't, but I imagine you'd have to in order to get them to understand that sometimes mistakes happen. And as you said yourself, it's how you deal with them that really proves your mettle.
Well, I think a lot of it starts right at the planning stages. So, in any film budget, there is a whole section that is contingency. So, say it's a $10 million film, there is 500,000 at least for contingency. Really, there should be 1 million.
Mm.
And I've had people look at budgets and say, what are you using a contingency for? I don't know.
Hmm.
It's a contingency. It's kind of the same thing when I'm strategizing with someone building their next thing. We're looking at, so what if this doesn't work? This, what we're trying now, it's almost like a lab. It is data. We're going to see what happens. And if it doesn't work, we will then move on to this next thing. So I'm already setting people up that the fact that we are trying things and that we aren't necessarily attached to the outcome. Not to get too Buddhist about it, but we know where we want to go, and maybe this particular route will get us there. But if not, we have another one. So I'm building up that feeling that, maybe this will work, maybe it won't. And talking like that seems to be unusual outside of the film industry. I found it very shocking at first.
I actually don't. I haven't worked as much in the film industry as you have. Uh, and that's the reason I'm saying that is because we get taught from an early age that failing is bad, that making mistakes is bad, that do it right or don't bother doing it at all. There are lots of lots of sayings about that sort of
True,
thing. And
true.
and yet the best stuff often comes after screwing up a bunch of times.
Oh
And
yeah.
so you're doing this in the strategizing phase and you're going, okay, let's change how you look at this process. And you're working with people who may have resistance to that. Do you have any techniques or any guidance on how to help people overcome the resistance to being willing to explore, to perhaps fail, to perhaps fall down?
Well, obviously, nobody wants to fail. Obviously, no one thinks, today I shall make a mistake. But we do know that running a business is hard. And if you run a business for any length of time, you know that things don't work out quite the way they are. So I always try and set people up with where we're expecting success, but planning for things needing a bit of a tweak along the way.
Mhm.
I'm always mentioning to people that things aren't a straight line. It's more of a spiky graph to get places. And I think for my people, certainly thinking about things as a test, as data. Nothing is the final result. It's we're just seeing where we go. And I also think by their nature, being an entrepreneur, you're a pretty creative, innovative, easily inspired person. Otherwise, you wouldn't be fool enough to be running your own business because it is such an emotional roller coaster. So
Mm.
as long as you are bolstered and supported, and I think that's why people come to coaches, it's why they get training, it's why they choose to be in a mastermind, because we want to think, okay, I'm going to be brave and see if this works. And I'm not talking about major failure or putting all of your eggs in one basket, but if we take, well, there's that lovely expression, little bets. Let's see if this works. Okay, that works better than I expected. Or even, oh, well, I won't be doing that again. And taking the pain out of it. Also, I think having a coach that is um, open to things not working. Because I
Mhm.
think if you're in that space where it's kind of, this is going to be enormous, we're going to make 1 million in a weekend. Yeah, no, that's unlikely.
Well, some have, but few,
True.
few do, right? But it's interesting. You mentioned masterminds, and you're talking about coaching, and there has to be a willingness to learn, and that's another thing that we have to overcome. The whole idea that we're supposed to know everything, and so when we're, oh my goodness, I don't know what's happening. Is that you or me?
I'm still here. Can you still hear me?
I can, but there's something very weird going on here, and I don't know why. There. Something, I think my cat just stepped on something. My cat likes to be in the studio with me. My cat likes to be in the studio with me when I record, and he just stepped on something and made it go, blah, 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 and I don't know what happened, but it doesn't matter because we're having a conversation and Zephyr will just have to wait. All right. So yeah, to get back to my question, this notion of exploration and feeling confident enough to explore, coaches will help you with that, and a mastermind group will help you with that. But I would love, before we go any further, talk to me about what a mastermind actually is, because lots of people, I think, me included, have a skewed idea of what a mastermind is and what a mastermind does and what a mastermind can do for you. Would you mind talking a little bit about just the very, pretend I'm 5 years old, and just really give me the basics of what that is and how people can use them to help themselves and their businesses?
I think it's very understandable because not many people have heard the term. And when you have heard the term, often they're things that either aren't masterminds or, let me whisper it, they're not very good mastermind. So a mastermind in essence is super simple. It is a small group of people who meet regularly and they discuss issues very openly. So it's a big place to ask a question, to be honest, to be in a room full of equals. You can ask a question and then you set a goal. This is the absolute key. Your goal will be completed by the next time you meet. So they could be a weekend and then you follow up with an online call where you check in on it. Obviously, if you're only meeting once for a weekend, your goal will be somewhat larger than if you're meeting every couple of weeks. But a good mastermind is this totally safe space with people who are about the same level and moving at about the same speed as you. So you don't have lots of very junior people and very senior people. You've got a nice mix of people who understand what you're going through. And that is so important because for many business owners, there is nowhere to really talk about your business and like really speak honestly about it. Because let's face it, I mean, some of the sort of networking places, it's not a place to go, you know what, I didn't make any money this week, or I'm really worried about what the banks just said to me. Whereas your mastermind, you can be really honest about it. The other thing you can do is in your mastermind, if it's carefully curated and put together, is ideate with a bunch of people who aren't going to steal your ideas, who have lots of sensible ideas from their own perspectives, and a place to think, to really be able to be vulnerable if you want to, celebrate if you'd like to, but just that feeling of having somewhere that you can actually go to and say, right, you know, I've been talking about doing whatever it is for the last 3 months. I'm not sure that's a good idea. And to have a group of people who are there for the long haul with you, who can say, what are you talking about? You've been talking about this for 3 years. Get on with it. That is worth a lot because your family, your friends, your mum, those people, they might, you know, be very supportive, but potentially they don't really understand what you're doing in your business day to day. Your mastermind will.
Okay. You just made my brain go explodey a little, and here's why. I say the same thing to my coaching clients in writing. Don't pay too much attention to your best reviews or your worst reviews, and don't pay too much attention to what your family and friends say about your work because they're keyed up to love you. And so it sounds to me like your mastermind is a place where people are going to root for you and try to do what's best for you, an effective one, I would say, but aren't going to be wearing rose-colored glasses about what you're trying to achieve, that they will give you more, I guess, honest or objective feedback. Is that an okay assumption? Because it
Yes.
leads into my next question.
Yes, I think so. There's one other aspect that I think is really important with a good mastermind, and let's just assume we're talking about good masterminds here, is that if you show up at the first mastermind session and declare what you want to do, so I'm going to change my marketing, I'm going to hire new people, I am this kind of coach or this kind of business. What is lovely is because you're fresh to the mastermind, people are going to simply believe you. They're not going to drag in all of that. But when you were 11 years old, you said, or you've tried this before. They don't have all that baggage. So as a group, we will hold you to whatever you would like us to hold you to. Now, obviously, if you're completely delusional and that shows up 6 months down the line, but right at the beginning, we will be very clear. Okay, if that's what you want to do. And I've seen business owners, just that simple being seen and heard and held by the, okay, go on then. And then as time passes, if you come in with some crazy, shiny idea that you've been excited by, which let's face it, is every entrepreneur at least once a year. If you come in with that idea, you've got a room full of people going, oh, that sounds lovely. But weren't you going to go and do that thing you told us about in January? And that is very powerful because that's not, it's not the voice of your conscience. It is the voice of people like, we believe in that goal for you. Don't you want us to hold you accountable to that?
I can see how accountability partners within a mastermind would be great because there is someone who, again, rooting for you and at the same time says something like, weren't you going to do this? Weren't you going to do that? And someone like me, I have 1,000 ideas a day, and I'm not exaggerating. They're just coming fast and furious all the time. And I feel like I have to pick them. And Kevin Kelly, I don't know if you know who he is. He's the guy who co-founded Wired magazine, and he's a futurist and technologist and blah, 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 blah. And he says that. He says that he has ideas constantly. And he says, I've never worried about somebody stealing my ideas. I give them away because I know there will be 24 more. Having said that, in that space, what if it is the right move for you to go, actually, I want to pivot and go into this other direction? Maybe I've gained some clarity and I'm bringing this to the mastermind. And I know we've all of a sudden gotten into the weeds, but can you trust your mastermind cohorts to understand that that's part of the process? Or is it not part of the process for a mastermind? And should you stick to what you said you were going to do?
Well, absolutely. I would say that being completely rigid, very bad idea. But normally an idea develops over time. So as you would convince your mastermind, as you would, hear me out, this is what I'm thinking. If everybody can give you a good, solid, yeah, I wasn't sure about it at first, but now I've thought about it. Yes, absolutely. People do regularly pivot within all of my masterminds.
Mm-hmm.
And as well as the mastermind itself, most masterminds, including mine, have a certain amount of coaching with whoever is running the mastermind. So I'm a strategist. So if someone comes in with this brilliant idea, we would get on a coaching call, work out if it's a good fit, and then take that back to the mastermind. What do you guys think? And that is very powerful because, yes, you're right. Sometimes we have to change. Sometimes a new idea is so good, it should be implemented immediately. And to have a room full of people who truly appreciate with everything they know about you and your business, yeah, that is a good idea. That makes it even more validated.
Mm. Mm. I want to get into the psychology of this. As the person who is running, and I don't know how many masterminds are you running? How many do you have personally?
So normally I run somewhere between 2 and 4, but in my more foolish years, I have run up to 13 at the same time. Don't do that. It is horrific.
I can't imagine. How would you keep them all straight? Yeah. So you're running, let's say we'll go split the difference and say you're running 3 masterminds.
Mm-hmm.
And you have, I imagine, vetted the people who want to be in your mastermind and made sure that people are a good fit. What do you do when people are direct competition for one another? Let's say they both are coming out with a productivity app for the iPhone and they have companies to do that, blah, blah, blah. How do you navigate the psychology for yourself around helping these folks do what they want to do and help them grow their businesses when there could be, and I don't know if there is, but there could be a conflict of interest depending on how they operate and you operate within the mastermind?
So obviously it's a concern that is often asked by clients. And there are 2 main ways to run a mastermind. You can run them with all people basically doing the same job. So all dentists or all real estate people.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can do like a mix of all sorts of different people who are at the same sort of stage in their business. the same kind of maturity, moving at the same kind of speed towards their goals. Now, if you had a mastermind filled full of people that were making apps, then you would choose people who were interested in the power that that would give them. Insiders working together. How can they not game the system, but work together so everybody rises? So as I was curating people in, I would consider and check with them how they would feel about having someone else who is in a very close niche. Would that empower them? Would that terrify them? And for a lot of people, that's the difference between, are you growth mindset, or are you horrified by the fact that the world is very small and there is only a very limited number of clients? You can tell which side I think about that. And if they truly didn't want it, they couldn't bear to be in the same group, I would simply put them in separate masterminds. Simple as that. Now, obviously, I'm in a lucky position where I have masterminds to do that. But one of my masterminds at the moment has several book coaches in it. This is actually quite a common thing because I read such a lot. I have a lot of book coaches in my world. And they all do slightly different things. They have, and even if they did exactly the same thing, they are surely, their different styles mean that they would appeal to different people.
It makes all sorts of sense to me, and I get it. I guess it got me down this particular path of, you're working these masterminds, and obviously you know what you're doing. It's what you do. But there are people running masterminds who frankly suck at it. So talk to me about that part of it. What are the pitfalls of an ineffective mastermind? What should people be watching out for if they're thinking about joining a mastermind?
Well, oh, where do I start? Let me just get up onto my soapbox. Hang on.
Yeah, I'll do.
So most people who run a mastermind have never had any training for it. So when you are asking about a mastermind, just see if they've done any training. Obviously, if they've run a mastermind for 10 years, then that's a pretty safe bet. They know what they're doing. Not guaranteed, but it's a pretty safe bet. Whereas if it's the first time they're running a mastermind, because I've certainly worked when I'm doing coaching or I'm being trained in something, occasionally, like anyone, I will do a course. And a few times I've done courses, sometimes very expensive programs to learn someone's funnel system, that kind of thing. And they will say, so you have a whole training program on masterminds? I'm like, yes, that's what I do. And they can't see the value in that, because as far as they're concerned, a mastermind is like running a webinar or a workshop. It's just something you do. I would say those masterminds, not very good, because it is that beautiful, delicate balance. The reason that people stay in my masterminds for years, and I have one delightful client who has been there for a decade. Obviously, she keeps re-upping, so she keeps choosing. And that's because they are curated. So a lot of not very great masterminds, they're not curated carefully. Maybe there's been no training. And training isn't the only thing, but you want someone who is doing much more than just facilitating. You want to be weaving together that tiny little community so it's good. And there are some things called masterminds that are excellent, but have no goals. They have no longevity. They have no checking in with each other. So there are things, the beautiful events called masterminds that I would say were a retreat or an event or some kind of talking or training situation. And some small part of me thinks, that's my word. Get away with it. Get your own word or whatever that is. Leave masterminds alone, you poor sods. That's mine. But that's just me, to be fair. But as long as you are looking for someone who knows what they're doing, because there is so much more than just facilitating a meeting. I think of it like this. So imagine you go out to a really nice restaurant and you have a lovely meal. And there are many things going on there. There's the environment, and that would be the facilitation, say. And then there's the waiter and the staff and how lovely they are. That's all that gorgeous facilitation. There's the food. That's exactly what you're talking about in your mastermind. And then there's the other people at the table. Now, if any of those are wrong, your guests are wrong, or the food is dreadful, or the restaurant is noisy and cold, even if the food is great, if you're cold, you're not going to enjoy yourself. If you've brought a terrible guest with you, you're not, it doesn't matter if the food's wonderful, it's still going to be dreadful. And for masterminds, you need facilitation, and you need the curation, and you need the coaching. You need all three of those to be nicely balanced.
It reminds me of good, fast, and cheap pick two. So how do you do that? How do you ensure that all three of those facets of a mastermind are in play during one of your masterminds? Is it all on you, or are the participants going to ensure that some of that happens and sort of self-select, if you will?
Well, a lot of it is obviously you have to train your participants to expect a certain thing. So I know that my clients, before they join, they are aware that there are commitments on them. They have to be there at least 80% of the time, because if somebody pours their heart out one time and the next person, and one person isn't there, and the next time you meet, that person has missed that huge emotional moment, that's not great for the group. Same way if someone is just not respecting everyone enough to be there often. So I expect people to be there a lot. And because we are all leaning in together, I see some of the best coaching I've ever seen is from one masterminder to another. And then obviously I'm facilitating. So if you do it well, as you know yourself, if you facilitate well, it's seamless. Nobody notices when facilitation is done really well. And that's just that's just a skill that you can train into yourself or be trained into. And when it's done well, you move smoothly from the more emotional moments to the quieter moments. You make sure that everyone feels seen and held. All of those safe space kind of slightly mawkish wording, it's all true when it's done well. So facilitation is simply a skill. You if you're running masterminds, you have to have that, and it's very learnable. Then you've explained to the people in the group how it's going to work, and you hold them to that. So there's expectation. But the big one is curation. And that's almost invisible to the people in the mastermind, because we don't know who isn't there. But I know, having spoken to hundreds of people with masterminds over the years, if not thousands, when people have had a difficult mastermind experience, whether that's as an attendee or running one, every single time when I ask them, did you think it would be problematic? There was always, yeah, I knew that guy was going to be trouble. I knew it. So it's trusting your gut about things like that, and following through on it. And it's difficult. It's very hard to say no to a client. And they might be a wonderful person, but just they'd be better in one-to-one, or they'd be better in some kind of group Q&A situation. But a mastermind, it's its own special thing. And in that space, somebody who's a little bit me, what you absolutely don't want, and you do see a lot in bad masterminds, is people don't want to be there for the group. They want to be there to get access to the coach who's running it. So the whole mastermind feels like taking a ticket at the deli counter. So you're just sitting through somebody, yeah, get on with it. I can't wait to ask my question. In a good mastermind, you are learning as much, helping as much the other people, and get as much value out of seeing other people resolve their issues as you are out of your own stuff.
I love the notion of that, but it takes, in my mind, it takes trust. So trusting yourself, trusting each other, trusting the facilitator. Can you talk to me about, from your perspective, what role do you believe trust plays in a successful mastermind, and how can you or somebody else who's facilitating one cultivate that trusting environment?
Well, yes, you have to have trust for sure, but you do with any coaching situation. And a lot of that is to do with scene setting and explaining. So you explain what you expect from people very carefully, very clearly, and more than once, ad nauseum, actually, to be honest, so that people are clear. Because most of us, we just want to get things right. Also, like a mastermind is probably quite a big expense. So you likely haven't run into it to taken the decision to join lightly. So you've probably already got quite a lot of know, like, trust with the person who's running it.
Mm.
And then I have a whole process for how to build trust, which is iterative, but it doesn't take as long as you expect. As long as people trust me and I'm curating super carefully, then the first mastermind that we do together as a group, it's all about introducing people and showing that there are lots of connections in the room. I'm sure you know that little neurological quirk that us humans have, where the more tiny little things that we have in common, the more we like each other. So if, I don't know, if say you and I had both broken a leg when we were young, and that was the only thing we had in common, whilst we would have very complex memories about how difficult it was as a 12-year-old falling out of a tree, we would not like each other as much as if we discovered right now that we use the same toothpaste, we have the same shoelaces, we have a cat of the similar breed, like the more of those little tiny things. So in that first session, as well as showcasing people, because most people are a little bit shy about talking about how fabulous they are. So me as the coach, part of what I'm doing is, really bigging them up and explaining to others. I've often had people say, oh, I just used to have a corporate gig. I'm like, hang on a minute, used to be the CFO of a pan-global company. Oh, yes, that. So my job is to make them seem impressive, whilst also explaining all the little tiny ways the group is together. So I'm always binding the group so that they feel safer. Because in that first session, what most people want at the end of the session is to feel, this is a nice group, they seem very pleasant, but also I have spent my money well. This is going to be very beneficial for me and my business if it's a business mastermind. And that feeling, so that first session is to allay fear and to make people feel I'm in the right room. And just that, taking that fear away, gives such a level of relaxation that people much more quickly start trusting each other. You must have seen something very similar when you were running workshops and managing that live interaction.
Oh, absolutely. And whenever I run any kind of workshop or work with a company to help them get to a place where we're ready to innovate, it takes that same kind of thing. And there also frankly, it takes having fun.
Yes.
One of the things that I really stress in any work that I do with any, whether it's individual coaching or companies or Spotify corporate, like I work for them, we have fun. Everything is, when you enjoy it, you tend to remember it better and you tend to be able to apply what you learn better. So that's sort of my thing. And yet you are coming to this from one of the most hectic industries ever, right? It's very new, relatively speaking, the film industry, but it's very hectic. I was just on a podcast last night called the Balancing Actor Podcast, where the woman who runs that podcast is a working actor. And just listening to her talk about just the hectic pace of everything made my head swim and my ears smoke. So when you're in that space, Liz, when you're in the space of facilitating, I know that you make it fun. You're totally delightful. And yet it can be high pressure and high stress. So you are bringing, I imagine, some of your own experience from the film industry, from that hectic environment in to develop that trust, to facilitate, and the most important thing, it sounds like, to curate. Can you talk a little bit about what skills you bring from the film industry to facilitating these masterminds so effectively?
Let me think. So, the I worked in post production, so I worked with the geeky boys, and they weren't boys when I was there. So basically, I sat in massive dark rooms with hundreds of us on computers. That's because little known fact about working in lighting and film, you mostly work in the dark. It's very,
Who
so
knew?
that the colors are correct. It's very annoying. So, the people I worked with, the thing about the film industry is we are paid large sums of money to be correct. People are paying for us to be certain about things. So when you put a team together, basically they would throw you in a room with 10 or 15 other people and say, we're locking the door now. You have to come out winning awards. Great. We'll let you out in a year. Okay, then. And having a room full of people who are paid to be right means by its very nature, you are with a lot of people who could very easily become very argumentative about it. But
Mhm.
it is, by its very nature, you cannot make a film on your own. Not make a very good one anyway. So all
Mhm.
of the kind of really high-end stuff, you have to collaborate with people, which means you have to be very aware of the tensions and the flow, and always reminding people we all want the same thing. We are all concentrated, not just on the end of the film, but on that experience of the user, of the film goer, sat there in the cinema, excited for the film to start. So you're continually looking to the big picture. And in a mastermind, it's kind of the same thing. What is our goal? Where are we moving towards? We're all here to support each other. So there's that kind of big picture stuff. There's quite a lot of, I'd say I learned quite a lot of conflict resolution from film directors.
I
Oh,
believe that.
oh. And to be honest, they're not, can I say this? They're not by nature dicks, but they are, they're very pushed. Most film directors, if you're working at the level we were working at, they have a film in pre-production. They've got a film that they're shooting, and then they have a film in post-production. Plus, they have the studio giving them a hard time. They've got the money people. They more than once. I would come in on a Monday and the whole film had been laid off because some suits in LA decided, nah, we're not going to make this one. So we're used to that sort of free fall of change and
Mm.
movement. And when you're in that cauldron, some amazing things get done. And yes, there are the flare ups, but that feeling of we're doing something wonderful. And that is really similar to entrepreneur life. And and also because I worked as an animator for quite a long time, I'm pretty good at body language, like the really subtle underlying muscle movement. And one of the things that I know I teach in my course, and I know is super useful for masterminds is years before we were all in Zoom, I was running Zoom masterminds because I was living in India and most of my clients were living in the US.
Mm.
And knowing when someone is upset but not saying anything by seeing a clench in their jaw, or there's some underlying muscles in the lower neck, that if you see that, it means that someone is upset enough to cry but they haven't actually noticed it themselves yet.
Mm. Hmm.
So to be able to say, now before I answer that question, I just seen something, what was that? And you don't know what it means, obviously, but being aware enough to be able to say, what did I just hear? What was that stutter? What was that pause? And so many times people would then, forgive me, burst into tears with, how did you know?
Mm.
Well, your neck gave you away. So being very, very present really helps.
I'm not surprised that you lived in India. That's very, that's very right there. Um, you have to be present. I completely agree with you. And yet you're running long-term masterminds. You say you have a person who's been with you from the beginning, and that's years and years, and she keeps signing up. So something about it is effective, obviously, for your mastermindees. What do you call them? Your
Reminders
participants?
is how I think of them.
Masterminders. Okay, so for your masterminders, something keeps them coming back. Obviously, you're fabulous and all that, but on the sort of effective scale, on the I'm getting something out of it and I'm helping others, but I am getting something, I'm getting enough out of it to want to keep going. How do you do that? How do you facilitate and curate the sessions so that they're fresh and engaging, especially for your long-term participants, for your long-term masterminders?
So what we're doing is making sure they hit their goals. And the way
Mm-hmm.
most masterminds work, my masterminds, is set with they're long, they're a year long. And most people don't start with a year. They start with they come in for a 3 month mastermind, get results, and then move on. So the real key, people stay because they get results. So this year, we will look at your strategy. We will put in place the things that will get you your goals by the end of the year or the middle of next year, depending on what
Mm-hmm.
goals we're working on. And often life gets in the way. So maybe it isn't quite the way you expect. Maybe you have a pivot. Maybe there's an illness. Maybe there's a global pandemic. So things change, but you've still put in place enough that you can see, right, this is going to work. This is what I need. So you join again to build the next year. And I think this is where masterminds are different from coaching or learning a skill, doing a webinar, training, because we are with you as you implement. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the key. Because obviously, a one-to-one coaching session, even if it's a long-term thing, you are there helping people moving forwards. Your mastermind is looking at this really big picture, and it's a place that you can come back to time and time again.
And I think that that is extraordinarily important, that notion of consistency. I
Yes.
I love that, and it's interesting because I work kind of the opposite way. I do more individual coaching than group coaching, if coaching as opposed to the workshops I do. But what's interesting is, and I've been told I have a terrible business model because I want to be superfluous to my clients. I'm very busy every January, for example, because people go, okay, let's plan my year, figure out all the action steps, see you next year. And because I want them to be able to do all this on their own. With the mastermind, it sounds like it is a very consistent stream of curation and feedback. And I imagine goal setting, goal achievement, and then on to the next goal. And these,
Yes. Yes.
yeah,
Sorry. After you.
yes. Yeah, no, 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 it's fine. I know I'm taking a long time to ask my question. I guess the thing that I'm thinking about in this is, when does somebody graduate? When do they go, okay, I've done this mastermind for a year and I'm done? Or does it happen sometimes, you know what, I'm in 6 months and right now this is either more than I can handle or I've gotten to a place where I'm ready to move on my own. How do you work when somebody's finished and they're ready to go?
So obviously it happens. I do want to be clear that I'm not infantilizing my people, to be sure. And in your model, if people did, because effectively what you're talking about in January, setting up the strategy, that's what I do with my clients at the beginning of the mastermind.
Mhm,
And all I'm adding compared to what you're explaining is just that accountability, that support as they implement.
mhm.
Because we've all had that thing in July or June or whatever, and you look at something and go, so that massive plan I had in January, is this right? Is this working? What on earth am I doing? And your mastermind can be there for you. So for me, the
Mhm,
key is that you join a mastermind and we set a goal for that mastermind. At the end of the year, if you decide to stay, we set a new goal
mhm,
next year.
mhm,
Because so I know there are people that run masterminds that are continual registration, and once you're in, you can be in there forever. But for me, there is always a start and an end.
mhm,
And at that point, we all decide, is this the thing for you? And quite a few people, they're in for 2 or 3 years and they move on and then they come back. And it's very much sort of what you need when you need it. And I think also there is many entrepreneurs, we want innovation, we want something exciting. So being, for many people, being in the same mastermind for 10 years would be the worst thing for them, not because the mastermind's not good, but because being anywhere at Tuesday at the same time for 10 years would be horrific.
mhm.
So there's a whole variety of ways, but I know that I've certainly helped people graduate from masterminds because, right, you came in to do X, you've done X, then we planned Y, you've done Y, and I think now it's time to go and do whatever it is. So I like you, I think it is important to help people choose to make the right decision, and ethical coaching requires that. I think going back to our point about what's a bad mastermind, people that where it's just a cash grab, just let's put it together. Right at the beginning, let's run a mastermind. If they're 10 grand, if I have 10 people, that's a really lovely chunk of change. and I've met lots of people like that. I'm like, so what's happening in your mastermind? Why are you running it? Oh, I hadn't really thought of that. What now? And the reason I have a training program for masterminds is that I used to get lots of friends would contact me in January and February saying things like, so I've planned this mastermind, it's going to be amazing. It's full. I've realized I don't actually really know how to bind the group together, how to run it, how to. I was like, what did you put on the sales page, my friends? So I used to do one-to-one coaching with those people to help them. And then I thought, you know what? This is obviously a common problem. So that's why I have a course for it. So I think a lot of people don't think it through. And that's where iffy masterminds come from.
That's where things go wonky. So I love that you have a course. Talk to me about what a course for mastermind facilitators looks like. What does that mean?
So there are now a couple of courses for mastermind. So mine is we talk about how to the theme for your mastermind, how it all fits together, how to curate, how to build community, how to manage because in every mastermind there is always a tricky session. It's normally in the middle, and it is the point where you have to push your people just a little bit. It's the same in coaching. So they've signed up to get results. If you're only ever nice Liz or nice is older, then they're not getting the money's worth, because sometimes we need to be pushed slightly out of our comfort zone. So I show people how to do that. And then I also show people how to put a sales page together, how to run a sales call, how to do the avatar research. And what I found is that quite a lot of the other, of which there aren't many, there are very few mastermind courses, they only really concentrate on the how to sell, how to create and how to sell a mastermind. The stuff I think is important is how to build that community. That's the stuff. And that's the key to whether or not your clients are going to stay in your mastermind for a long time. Whether are they raving about it as the best thing ever, or are they thinking, what did I pay for? This is awful.
Yeah, and I imagine that notion actually sort of rears its lovely head, not ugly head, but lovely head in community. Do they feel like they're a community of people working towards sometimes separate, sometimes similar goals, but are they there with one another? And I think that that notion of, like you've been talking about, let's not just talk about how you start a mastermind, and let's not just talk about how you sell the 10 spots for the mastermind. I've certainly seen my share of that, but we're talking about the ongoing establishing and building of relationships, right? These are people often who are in high stress lives. How do they get to the place where they feel okay being vulnerable, where they feel okay expressing themselves, expressing their emotions? And you have to be the person who holds space for that and encourages everybody else to hold space for that. What do you do for your own self-care to ensure that you're going to be able to be there for them?
That's a very good. That's a very good question. So when I think this is something that a lot of new coaches don't realize is at first coaching is incredibly tiring. And I know my masterminds are 2 hours long, and concentrating for 2 hours on 6 people and yourself, like really, really concentrating, making sure that neck muscles aren't twitching. That person's about to cry. That person's on their phone. Let me just bring this person back in. So allowing that space for, I used to try and run 3 masterminds in a day, and that
Boy.
is yes, that was foolish. I will be honest, that was simply foolish. So now I never run more than 2 in a day, but I batch them together. So if I have a lot of masterminds, I run them on consecutive days. And by the end of that, third day, so I was doing 6, the end of that last mastermind, I am so smooth with the whole mastermind. I'm so limbered up with mastermind goodness that it becomes easier. But I always book the day off afterwards, because try as I might, concentrating for such a long period, you are going to get tired. And that's also one of the things that I make sure that my new mastermind coaches really pay attention to. Because if you've done a lot of workshops, you're going to be tired the next day. But the more you do, the less tired you will be. With masterminds, yes, I'm less tired now than I used to be after running masterminds. But it is a lot of concentrating. And if you do it well, like anything, the other thing I've noticed is part of why your attention is so important is my attention holds the whole group, whoever the mastermind coach is. So even if I look down to my notebook, when I look back up, everyone else has looked away. It's really interesting. It's that there's a mind space. If it almost never happens, but say, I don't know, the doorbell goes, something that would take me away from this ultra concentration on the group. When I turn back again, everybody's turned away. And that's not because I am some Svengali, but simply there is a process where you hold attention for the group. Until I'd done it so much, I would have thought that was a bit, no, that can't really be true. So true. You must have seen it with your workshop rooms as well.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. And what's interesting is, for me, it's not even a physical looking away. If I have a lapse of the energy that I am facilitating with, that will also break their attention. And so much of what I do in my workshops is all about, how do you do this energetically without necessarily having to do all the physical jumping jacks. And it is fascinating to me to watch when people realize they can extend their intention outside of their physical body and actually work with the energy and the intention and the body language and watch it work and have their minds blown. It's one of my favorite things, I have to admit. So yeah, absolutely. But it is also interesting to me, as I'm listening to you speak, that we're calling you the facilitator, but you are the leader. You are the leader of this group of people who have decided, by joining you, to be followers, to help you with their attention and with their intention. And I'd love it if you can talk a little bit about the responsibility of that. Not just does it exhaust you, because I imagine sometimes, as you said, you are exhausted, but what does that do for Liz personally to know that you have taken on voluntarily the responsibility of guiding this particular pack of folks?
Well, you're right, it's such a lot of trust. It is very lovely. But what I love about masterminds, which is part of the same thing, is if I'm coaching with someone, I'm always thinking about their business. Always. It's always in the back of my mind. So with a group, mastermind group, I'm also thinking about the group and how people can help each other and how it fits together. So I begin to think about them as an entity in themselves. So there's each of the individual participants, but there's the group itself. And if you've ever read Priya Parker's The Art of Gathering, she talks about generous authority. That feeling of your loyalty is to the group, not just the individual. And that is a very precious, very beautiful thing. I do feel very grateful that people are putting their trust in me. But one of the things I love about masterminds is there's not a lot of prep. Obviously, you have to fill your mastermind. You have to make sure it's moving forwards. But come the day of a mastermind, as long as you are clothed and facing the right way on your camera, you're all ready, because you don't know what they're going to ask you. You don't know what the questions are. And then when the mastermind is finished, once you've uploaded the recording, there's no homework. Your clients have homework, they've got goals to do. But for you, there's no follow-up. There's no writing a report. There's no sending out goals. Certainly not if you do it the way I suggest. Everyone writes their goals down and you go from there. So for those 2 hours, that's it. 5 minutes before we start, I'm there, ready to go. 5 minutes afterwards, I'm done. And that is a beautiful thing. There's follow-up, there's a little bit of one-to-one. But to run a mastermind in the style I use, these ultra small, very personal masterminds, it takes 7 hours a month on average. Some months are more, many months are less. And so at the beginning and the end, when people are a bit more nervous, they take a bit longer. But 7 hours a month to run a 4 or a 6-person mastermind, that's, if I was coaching each one of them, I would be coaching them for more each month. So it's very efficient.
Sign me up. I love that. Because, but at the same time, I have to ask about what your meditation practice is, because you must have one in order to be able to stay that present. What do you do for yourself to stay present and accounted for in, at one point, 13 minutes? So it just blows my mind.
That was dreadful. So I used to do an enormous amount of Sushumna massage, meditation, which is the Sushumna is a sort of energetic sleeve around your spine, which allows you to sit very still and keeps you very clear. But recently, I haven't been meditating. And oddly enough, it's something that has come up several times this week. I should be meditating more. But I have chronic fatigue. I spend a lot of time resting, reading and resting. And I'm thinking that there is a link from not meditating enough, because obviously meditation is very restful in itself. And the act of resting is a much more passive event than actual meditation. But yeah, I meditated for a long time. I actually find the act of masterminding extremely relaxing. It's tiring because I'm concentrated, but it is so lovely to see so many people that when a mastermind works, everybody leans in, everyone's helping each other. You can see it on each other's faces. And if you've got it right, there are a few moments in every mastermind where you'll be giving a piece of advice to one person in the mastermind, and you can see that it resonates for everybody. It's like a key in a lock. You can see that moment where things shift for people. And I think if you're a coach, that's what you live for. That's the great bit. That's the exciting moment.
It's my catnip whenever I'm teaching a workshop and I see that what I'm saying is no longer the important thing, what they're helping each other with, how they are finding those pathways among themselves is the best thing. It just makes me feel like I've eaten a whole bunch of really great French fries. So, okay. So I feel like I have like, I don't know, 24 more questions I could get to, and hopefully you'll be willing to come back and we'll talk about this even more, because there's so much. But I would love to, I understand a little bird told me that you have been thinking about or are already putting some of these thoughts down in the form of a book. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I can. I am writing a book, I have to say glacially slowly, but I am writing it. I'm dyslexic, so that's my excuse. But yes, it's called Think Like a Film Crew. And that book is about all the things I learned in film that are helpful for entrepreneurs. But as I'm saying that, I realize that maybe you're asking about, I am writing a mastermind handbook, which is the book, the book before the book after the current one, but it is on its way. And I'm splitting that into 2 parts. So there's going to be how to sell a mastermind and how to run a mastermind.
Nice.
They're not the same thing.
Sure.
Again, hang on, I'll just get up on my soapbox again. I am so sick of those bropreneurs that are out there going, you just need to sell it, it'll be fine. Yeah. I want to protect the whole industry. Stop that. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, and I was actually asking about Think Like an Entrepreneur. I mean, Think Like a Film Crew, but I'm happy to know about the Mastermind books too. What's interesting to me about what you're saying with dyslexia, I do not have dyslexia, but I speak better than I write. And so a little thing from me to anybody who's listening, if you're thinking of writing a book and you feel like your fingers just aren't doing it, I dictated I've written 9 books. The last 4 books I dictated right into my phone, voice to text. And that is a really beautiful way of getting your ideas down. So, just in case you want to try that, Liz, I highly recommend doing that. It works incredibly well. All right. So, again, I have a bunch of questions, but
Mhm.
I will stop. If somebody's interested in knowing more about masterminds, knowing more about you and what you are all about and how you might be able to help them in their business with strategy, with coaching, with perhaps being part of your masterminds. How does somebody find Liz Scully?
So there are 2 places you can look for me. If you go to my mastermind website, it's called rethinkcentral.com. And I have made your lovely listeners a secret page.
Mm.
Rethinkcentral.com/Isolda will take you to a place. You don't even have to opt in. It will give you some free PDFs about running a mastermind. There's some videos to watch. And of course, if you'd like to join my list, feel free feel free to do so. I like listeners, I like anyone to be on the list because they want to be on the list, not because they got a freebie. So
Oh, yes.
so that's where all my mastermind information lives. But I have on my personal website, lizscully.com, I have some information about, if I may mention it, I have a podcast of my own. So there's a little
Ooh.
information over there, and it's all about books. So if you're a reading listener, go and check out that as well.
Ooh. 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 I had no idea about that. And I did my research. So I'm really, really excited about that part of it. Um, yeah, I'm going to pitch myself to your podcast. That would be super fun.
Well, you know you're in. That's an obvious yes. Goes without saying.
That would be super fun. Talking about books, book publishing, book everything. Yeah, I'm a huge reader and I'm a huge writer, so I love that. I'm so glad that you said that. And that's so funny because I went to lizscully.com and did not see that, even though it's first. See, this is what happens. I am not dyslexic, but I obviously go word blind. That is something for sure that happened because I was on there and I did not see it.
Well,
So that's
maybe it's a sign I need to make that a bit more prominent. Then
maybe.
I shall take the note from the universe.
Well, and it's because it's behind the burger, the 3 little horizontal lines on me, where and maybe that means that my Chrome page is too narrow or something because I did not see it. That's so funny. But I do have to say I love the colors. Those are all my colors. The dark blue, the turquoisey lighter blue, and the purple. Those are all my color. A variation, but those are it. So yay. I love you many, many ways over, and this is just one of them. So I will put all of this stuff in the show notes because people should be finding out about the masterminds, about the coaching that you do, and certainly about the BizBook broadcast, all of that stuff. You're so amazing and fabulous. And I'm really grateful that you took the time to be on the show. All of those links will be there. If you're listening to this, obviously, you have to go learn more about Liz Scully and about the masterminds and about the podcast. So, do that. Liz, super grateful to you for taking the time to be here and to talk about this because a lot of us have no idea. I have had a lot of misconceptions about masterminds. So I'm very excited that you were willing and able to give all of this wonderful knowledge and wisdom. Thank you so much.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. And I really, really would love everybody to be in a fabulous mastermind. It doesn't have to be mine, although, but any mastermind that can really help people. They are so wonderful. So thank you so much for letting me burble on about how fabulous they are.
Oh, and it's great. I mean, having a group of people whose interest is helping you succeed as you help them succeed, and you are all in the boat together is a beautiful thing. I have 2 more questions for you, and these are questions that I ask everybody who comes on the show. And they're silly questions, but I find that they can yield some profound answers. And the first question is, what is it that gets you up in the morning? And I don't mean your alarm.
Actually, I never wake up with an alarm. I am entirely powered by light. When it gets
Nice.
light, I am awake. And
Nice.
that is a problem when living in London in the winter,
Oh
because
yeah.
I don't get
You
up for a very long time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But then in London in the summer, when the sun comes up at what, 4 a.m.
Yep, I've been up for a long time today.
Yikes. Well, you being willing to come on the show at this hour and when you've been up and up and up all day long, I am super grateful. So here's my last question. And the question is, if you had an airplane, environmentally friendly, of course, that could skywrite anything for the whole world to see, what would you say?
What a fabulous question. I would skywrite, go get cake. That is what I want the world to do.
I like it. Go get cake. That's awesome. I would probably say go get French fries, but that's, I love cake too. So I am 100% on board with the go get cake. Liz, thank you so much for being here. This has been such a delight, and I hope you'll come back and we'll, because I have another 14 questions I could ask you, but I know you have an evening to get to, and I don't want to keep you from it. So thank you again for being on the show. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
If you've been listening to this show, you need to go find out more about what Liz can do for your business and for you to help you achieve those goals, but also in a way that is obviously delightful and fun, because Liz is delightful and fun and knows her stuff. And if you're a cinephile, that's probably a really good thing too. In the meantime, I am Isolde Trachtenberg for the Creative Solutions Podcast. You know where to find me. You know what to do, all of that stuff. Thank you so much for listening. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. And until next time, I remind you as always to be bold, be creative, and most of all, be kind. Thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. Please subscribe to the show if you're new, and it would mean the world to me if you told a friend about it. Today's episode was produced by Isolde Trachtenberg and is copyright 2024. As always, please remember this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Past performance does not guarantee future results, although we can always hope.